dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original? You heard it. Crew. They need you. I never need you for nothing. Don't come back up sinking for me ever again. Don't need backup. The solo thing. I'm Bobby. You the rest of them. I don't need y'all. Remember that. You running. Bobby. No, I'm Bobby. Ricky and Mike. Remember that. It's your boy DJ New Kid, your girl.
Sierra Nicole.
We're back on the channel with another
Kid is the original.
Let me get my solo. See, that's the okay. Thing, bro. We was all doing. Y'all always wanted to give it. Never.
Okay, baby, come on.
It's Bobby time.
Oh, gosh.
Welcome back to the channel, man. We got Mr. Ballen for y'all, man.
Welcome.
We got This Demon Still Lives Among Us. Don't know what we getting into. Don't know what to expect, but I know what y'all expect. Make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go if you want to first support. All you gotta do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, as always, lock it in with a thumbs up. We ain't gonna hold y'all. Y'all know what time it is. It's Mr. Ballen time, so it's time to go ahead and get into it. Let's check it out. Let's see what's about. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
This video is brought to you by HelloFresh. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please go to the like button's place of work 1 minute before closing time, and then proceed to browse around for about 30 minutes, and then leave without buying anything. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 1957, 31-year-old Larry Bader was living with his wife, Mary Lou, and their 3 kids in Akron, Ohio. Larry was a good father and good husband, but he was a terrible businessman. Over the past several years, he had launched several new business ventures, and they had all failed, throwing the family into fairly significant debt. And so even though Larry desperately wanted to be an entrepreneur and eventually start a quality business, they didn't have the money to do that. And so he had to just take some job in order to pay the bills. And so the job he got was a cookware salesman for a local company, and it did pay the bills, but it did not make Larry happy. And so on the weekends when Larry was not working, and if it was okay with his wife, he would basically just disappear and go fishing on Lake Erie, which is about an hour north of where they lived. And that was his way of kind of disconnecting from reality and kind of disconnecting from his somewhat crappy life. And so on Friday, March 15th, Larry approached his wife and said, hey, I'd like to head up to Lake Erie and go fishing for the weekend. And she would tell him, I got the kids, it's fine, you can go do that, but I heard the weather was going to be really bad. Are you sure that's such a good idea? And Larry would tell her, you know what, don't worry about it. These storms, they always hype them up. They're never a big deal. I'll be fine. And so he kissed his wife, he kissed his kids, he grabbed his stuff, he hopped in his truck, and he left and headed up to Lake Erie. That night, Lake Erie was hit with a massive thunderstorm, way bigger than the one that the news was predicting. And then the following morning, the Coast Guard discovered Larry's boat floating around on Lake Erie. There was minor damage to it, and it was missing an oar, and it was missing Larry. Larry was nowhere to be found. And so a search was launched for Larry, but he was never found, and he was eventually declared dead. And so even though the family did not have Larry's body, they would hold a funeral for him, and his wife was able to actually cash his life insurance policy, which was enough to pay for her and the kids. 8 years later, in 1965, Larry Bader's niece, a 21-year-old woman named Suzanne Peka, was in Chicago at a sporting goods show with a friend of hers. And as they're walking through the different exhibits, looking at different sporting goods equipment, they noticed over on the outside of the building, there was a fairly large group of people gathered around this one particular exhibit. And so she and her friend she was with walked over to this group, and they kind of pushed their way through. And in the middle of this group was this man with an eye patch and a big mustache doing an archery demonstration. Basically, he was shooting arrows into a target about 30 feet away. And so Suzanne and her friend just kind of watched this guy for a couple of minutes, and very quickly they could see why he was attracting this big crowd, because he was just an incredible archer. He was hitting the bullseye over and over and over again. But as they continued to watch this guy, Suzanne's friend started to notice something unique about him. And he eventually turned to Suzanne and said, "Hey, doesn't this guy look exactly like your uncle who went missing on Lake Erie?" And Suzanne was kind of surprised to hear him talking about her missing uncle, but she turned and looked at this guy, and all of a sudden she saw it too. He was a spitting image of Larry Bader, her uncle, although this guy had an eye patch and a mustache, but even with that, he looked exactly like Larry. And as Suzanne is watching him, she's thinking, you know, Larry was known for being this incredible archer, and here this guy is who looks just like him, and he's an incredible archer. And so after this demonstration was over, Suzanne and the friend ran over to this guy with the eye patch on, and Suzanne says to him, "Hey, I know this sounds totally crazy, but you look exactly like my uncle, Larry Bader, who went missing on Lake Erie 8 years ago." And so the guy, he hears her and he kind of smiles and says, "You know, I'm sorry, I don't know Larry Bader. My name is John Johnson. People call me Fritz. I'm sorry, I don't know who your uncle is. I can't help you." But Suzanne, as she stood there staring at this guy, she was becoming more and more convinced this was Larry Bader, despite the fact this guy is saying he is not Larry Bader. And so she says to him, "No, you are Larry Bader. I'm positive you're my uncle." Now at this, Fritz would be polite but firm, and he would reiterate that, "Look, I'm not your uncle. I don't know who Larry Bader is. I don't go to Lake Erie. I just don't understand why you think I'm him. I live in Omaha, Nebraska with my wife and my kids, and I'm on TV. I do sports journalism in Omaha, and I advise archery companies, and that's why I'm here. So I don't know why you think I'm your uncle, but I'm not. I'm sorry." And with that, Fritz turned around and he walked away. And after this discussion, Suzanne and her friend were not remotely deterred from what Fritz was saying. They were completely convinced this was Larry Bader.
I'm so confused now. I thought I knew what I was thinking.
I thought so too.
That's the reason why I ain't paused. I was
But
like,
then now he was like, okay,
but
he's like,
on TV now. But
I see. I need
a little bit more information, because I was keen in, but we still might
because
be
we've
right.
heard. Okay.
And so they ran to a phone, and Suzanne called her two other uncles, so Larry Bader's brothers, and she explained how she met this guy that is the spitting image of their brother, and they immediately hopped on a flight that night and flew to Chicago, and the following morning, the two uncles, along with Suzanne and her friend, they went back to the sporting goods show, they went over to the archery exhibit, and sure enough, there was Fritz doing his archery demonstration, and as soon as there was a break, Suzanne, her friend, and now the two uncles, so Larry Bader's brothers, they walk over, and the two uncles, as soon as they see this guy, despite the eye patch, despite the mustache, they too would say, "This is our brother." And so they approached him and they said, "Look, I know you're saying you are not our brother. I don't know what's going on here, but you look exactly like our brother, and we have his military paperwork right here with fingerprints. Will you please just humor us and go to the police station with us and get fingerprinted? That way you can prove you really are not our brother. Please, we've been looking for our brother for a long time. This would be a huge favor to us." And so Fritz was annoyed. He didn't want to do it, but he's like, "Okay, fine. I'll go to the police station with you. I'll get my fingerprints taken, and we can put this behind us." And so that day, they left the sporting goods show. They went to a police station, and Fritz had his fingerprints taken. And afterwards, the police would tell him, "You are Larry Bader." When Fritz heard this, he could not believe it. I mean, he literally did not believe he was Larry Bader. It wasn't like this revelation prompted new memories and suddenly he recalled it all. It was really the opposite. Fritz immediately is trying to rack his brain to figure out, like, is my whole life a lie? But there was nothing. All he had was a contiguous stretch of memories from when he was a very young child as Fritz Johnson all the way to the present. But we now know that the bulk of his memories are all not real. He was never a child as Fritz Johnson. He was Larry Bader, and then became Fritz Johnson only 8 years earlier. The timeline of what happened to Larry Bader is rough at best, but as far as we understand it, Fritz Johnson showed up in Omaha, Nebraska a couple of days or a couple of months after Larry Bader went missing on Lake Erie. And when Fritz showed up in Omaha, he just walked into a restaurant and asked for a job there, and he had provided documentation that showed he was in fact Fritz Johnson, and nobody thought anything of it. He was completely normal. There was nothing unusual about his behavior, and over time, Fritz just kind of thread himself into the Omaha community. I mean, he got married, he had a child, he adopted another child, he left his job as a bartender at a restaurant and eventually got this amazing job as a sports TV broadcaster for their local channel. I mean, he was like a minor celebrity in Omaha. Everybody recognized, oh, there's Fritz Johnson. He's on TV. Hey, Fritz, how you doing? I mean, he had a full-blown life. But as soon as the news broke that he was not Fritz Johnson, he was Larry Bader, right away, the TV station he worked for fired him. His second wife left him because in reality, he actually was still legally married to his first wife. And so his marriage to his second wife was never actually real to begin with. And so she leaves him. And then also because Larry Bader was no longer dead, the insurance company that had paid out all that money to his first wife as part of his life insurance policy, they demanded that he repay them. And throughout all this drama of Fritz finding out he's Larry Bader, Fritz continued to say he was not Larry Bader, that this was all a big mistake. He just could not understand how this could have happened. None of it made sense. And so eventually a team of experts, doctors, psychologists, you name it, they came out to Omaha and they ran Fritz, aka Larry Bader, through a battery of tests over almost 2 weeks. And at the end of all their testing, they concluded that one, Fritz definitely is Larry Bader. So there's no debate there. He is Larry Bader. And two, he is almost certainly suffering from an extreme case of amnesia, which is memory loss. But the doctors and experts had no idea how he developed this case of amnesia. And of course, Fritz, he too had no idea how he developed this case of amnesia. And it's unlikely we'll ever get any more clarity on exactly what happened to Larry Bader / Fritz, because unfortunately, just 1 year after it was discovered Fritz was Larry Bader, Fritz would die. He had cancer in one of his eyes, and that was actually why he wore that eye patch, and the cancer had come back and it took his life. Today, his case is considered to be one of the most believable and baffling cases of amnesia on record. Before we get into
That's the wildest thing, bro. Like,
That's crazy.
Because I thought he faked his death because he went out there to.
That's what you were. Where you were.
So
going.
where I was going was because his wife told him, "Hey, do you want to just like basically rain check? It's storming real bad." He was like, "No." He was more persistent to go out there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he possibly faked his death, thought he was gonna get away with it because he was already in financial debt and he probably wanted like, "Hey, what's the best way for me to get them and get my family out of financial debt?
Oh, okay.
Let me fake my death. They can't find me out here on the water. I can easily scatter get away, and then the insurance will pay out because insurance fraud is like stuff like that happens a lot.
Yeah, it does.
And then they pay them out, and I go off, especially back in the 60s.
Yeah,
you can't trace it like you can now.
Yeah,
so I can easily skate away and just go live a whole separate life. Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking at first, because I'm like, because the insurance money will be able to take care of them. They can get back on their feet. Oh, okay. And they can be able to do things. So I was thinking he faked his death.
Well, I didn't think. I thought we were on the same page. I didn't think that. I really thought something actually happened out there, which 9 times out of 10, something probably did. I don't know. But I thought something probably happened out there, maybe when he was on the boat, since, with the storm. I didn't know if just something bizarre. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that it was one of those cases where he just, again, something bizarre happened, and then he thought he was somebody else. Because we have heard stories like that where something has happened, or they maybe have hit their head or got struck by like some type of light or something, and you just kind of like come out of it and you think that you're this whole different person, which kind of
Remember that first video we ever reacted to of his? Like the very first. It was that woman who fell, hit her head or something, and she tapped back into the life that she had years ago. And she knew all these things because she was like, I am this person.
Yes,
and it's like reincarnation.
Yes.
So it could be.
I thought it was one of those type of stories.
He could have. If you believe in that, not saying y'all do, not saying we do, but if you believe in that, it could be that when he hit his head, or if anything,
whatever happened
to him, could have knocked him, and he forget about Larry Bader and only remember the life he had previously before, which is this Fritz Johnson guy, and that's the reason why he had memory of his childhood as Fritz Johnson.
Fritz, yeah.
So, because that's the life he lived previously before. If you believe in reincarnation, that type of thing, we got other videos on the channel.
Because I'm wondering also, how did he have documentation to show
that's the one that kind of
that,
like,
hey, I am John Johnson. That's my name. This is my information.
That was like weird.
That's the only thing that kind of threw me.
And that's another reason why I was like,
dang, well, that's not what I was thinking.
But that's another reason why I was like, he possibly faked his death because he got these fake documentations. Hey, this is who I am.
But then in the end, he actually had
amnesia.
Yeah.
Which we still don't know too much because, unfortunately, he died right
I wonder, he had eye cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, well, I don't want to get into that, but
Just outside of the popular tourist town of Amaga in northern Colombia lies this thick green jungle. And if you know where to look, there is actually a walking path that leads you from Amaga deep into this jungle. And if you keep going, it will bring you all the way to this terrifying, enormous old railroad bridge that spans this huge ravine. Now, this bridge is no longer used by trains. It's been decommissioned. However, since its decommissioning, there's actually been, ironically, more traffic on this bridge, although it is the foot traffic variety. People come out to this bridge to go bungee jumping. Bungee jumping is a thrill-seeking activity where people will leap off of high places, like this bridge, and they'll jump with an elastic rope tied to their ankles. And so this rope has been very carefully measured so that when it is fully stretched all the way out, it ensures whoever has jumped will still not impact the ground. Back in early July of 2021, a 25-year-old Colombian lawyer named Yesenia Gomez, who lived about an hour north of Amaga in the larger city of Medellin, she told her boyfriend that she wanted to go bungee jumping. This was something Yesenia had talked about for a long time, wanting to go bungee jumping, but every time it became a real thing and they were actually going to go do it, she would back down because she was just too scared. But for whatever reason, in July of 2021, Yesenia had the confidence and the courage to actually see this thing through. And so her boyfriend, when he heard how serious she was, he capitalized on the opportunity because he had never bungee jumped before and he really wanted to, but he couldn't without his girlfriend. And so now it seemed like she was serious. And so right away, he called the Amaga bungee jumping company to book a slot for he and Yesenia to jump off of their bridge. So on the day they were supposed to jump, which was Sunday, July 18th, Yesenia and her boyfriend hopped in their car and they drove an hour south to Amaga. And when they got there, they found the walking trail and they made their way out to this bridge. And when they get out to this bridge, they are amazed at the number of people who were already in line on this bridge waiting to jump off of it. They knew this was a popular spot, but perhaps they didn't realize just how popular it was. And so Yesenia and her boyfriend, they get in line behind the nearly 100 other jumpers ahead of them, and they proceed to wait. And over the next several hours, Yesenia and her boyfriend would have front row seats to all of the jumpers ahead of them jumping off the bridge. Now, it seems like Yesenia, in her mind, believed she would arrive at this bridge and very quickly she and her boyfriend would leap off and it would be great and so much fun. But now they've been forced to wait for a really long time. And this whole time, they're watching other people jump. And Yesenia is starting to panic. Suddenly, bungee jumping looked terrifying. It did not look like something she wanted to do. And so she was beginning to second guess her decision. And so her boyfriend, he's trying to calm her down and he's telling her, oh, it's totally safe. Look at all these people who have jumped. They're all fine. They're all smiling. They're so happy. You're going to be so proud of yourself. But despite his best efforts to calm his girlfriend down, Yesenia just could not calm down. But she did tell her boyfriend that she's not about to back down. She's going to go through with this. And so several hours went by, this totally high-stress, anxious waiting period. And then finally, Yesenia and her boyfriend reached the front of the line, at which point the staff members who've been doing this all day long, they signal the two to step forward and get their harnesses on. And so Yesenia and her boyfriend, they make their way to the edge of the platform, so they're looking out over this ravine, and the staff members are putting on their harnesses and getting them ready. And the whole time, Yesenia, she's starting to get tunnel vision, her heart is racing, she's totally panicked. She doesn't think this is fun at all. She just wants to get this over with. And then at some point, one of the staff members finally says, okay, jump. And so Yesenia jumps. Except it would turn out Yesenia had made a mistake. That staff member who had said, okay, jump, was talking to her boyfriend, not Yesenia. However, Yesenia, in her totally panicked state, had just not understood and had leapt, believing they were telling her to jump. However, the staff members had only put her harness on. They had not attached the actual elastic rope to her ankles. And so when Yesenia jumped, there was nothing stopping her from smashing into the ground. And so as soon as she leapt off the bridge, her boyfriend ripped off all of his gear and he ran down the bridge, he leapt over the railing, and he ran down the hillside all the way to the bottom of this ravine. But when he finally got to his girlfriend, it was already too late. She was already gone. It would later be determined Yesenia did not die from impacting the ground. She actually died from a heart attack she suffered on the fall down, which means she must have realized after she jumped that she jumped too early, that she did not have the bungee cord attached to her legs. And so literally the fear of what was about to happen to her killed her.
You know what's so crazy though? Even if she bungee jumped, you know, could it possibly because she was already a nervous wreck.
What?
So even with her bungee jumping, could it have possibly been she could have still possibly had a heart attack because she was already nervous and anxious, and to be real, wanted to back out, but she was like, I brought him here, I can't back out because.
Yeah, I mean,
because when she leapt over, did she really 100% realize that or was she just that afraid where she had a heart attack? Because her heart probably was already racing.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Before she even got there.
But
and it was a lot of stress on the heart from just waiting for hours.
Yeah, but again, I can't
really
say.
Know.
Yeah, so.
I'm just saying because it's a possibility that, you know what I'm saying, even with her doing a jump, it's a possibility that the jump could
jump alone, even if she was attached at the ankle, she probably still could have. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, nobody knows.
But either way, it's sad.
That's a sad situation, man. Like doing high risk things, man. I personally, it ain't for me anyway. You already know that.
And personally, for me, like, say for instance, I was somebody that wanted to do something like that, which I'm not. But if I wanted to, just seeing the line and seeing that these same staff members have been here for hours doing the same thing repetitive over and over and over gives me anxiety because there's room for mistakes because you're just like doing stuff and like you probably tired. Y'all been out here all day.
Well, the mistake necessarily wasn't on them in the first place. It was.
No. I'm not saying that it was a mistake on them. I'm just saying personally that would like in my head they'll be like, oh, it's too many people here. Like I just like let me be the first to go. Let me be the first while it's fresh. Get it over with. I don't want to have to like wait for like hours and hours and hours. And then, because I'm working myself up, I'll be like, I'm working myself up and anything is like bound to happen. Yeah. Just, I don't know. I'm afraid of heights. Like, I'm afraid of those, like those heights, like doing stuff like that. I cannot.
Yeah.
In early 1974, 31-year-old Michael Taylor was living happily with his wife Christine and their 5 children in Ossett, which is a small town in central England. Michael was described as a great father and a great husband who had an excellent sense of humor. In fact, neighbors, whenever they would walk past the Taylor household, would say you could often hear the sound of Michael laughing or the sound of him telling jokes to his family. But in April of that year, everything changed for the Taylor family. Michael had been doing some home repairs when he fell off of a ladder and he hurt his back. The injury itself was fairly minor, but it resulted in chronic pain. And this chronic pain quickly changed how Michael behaved. Michael went from being this cheerful, funny, happy guy to being sad and depressed. And he was so irritable that his family could barely be around him because he would lash out at them. Now, the Taylor family was not a religious family. However, most families who lived in Ossett at that time were. And so when one of Michael's friends found out about how poorly Michael was doing, they approached Michael and said, you know, you really ought to turn to religion for help and for guidance in this difficult time. And they also told him specifically that he really ought to check out this one particular Christian group. It was called the Christian Fellowship Group, and all it was a prayer group for Christians who wanted more religious support beyond just going to church on Sundays. But this friend of Michael's told him that the real draw of this group was the group's leader. Her name was Marie Robinson, and she was this 21-year-old, extremely friendly and energetic and charismatic person who just had this incredible way of making all of her members really feel like they belonged. And so Michael's friend was telling him that he really thought Marie could be the difference maker for him, that she could help him get back to normal. And so Michael, you know, he trusted this friend, and he really didn't have much to lose at this point. He was already at rock bottom, and so he agrees to go check this group out. So on September 12th of that year, Michael makes his way to the church where this fellowship group is held. He goes inside and he makes his way to one of the back rooms in the church. And when he goes inside, he sees there's a ring of people sitting in a circle, about 20 people. And as soon as they see Michael coming in the room, they all stand up and they open their arms up and they say, come on, come sit down with us. Welcome to the group. And then the woman who had to be Marie, she stands up and she looks at Michael, huge smile on her face, and she encourages him to come over and sit right next to me. Welcome. We'd love to have you join our group. And so Michael, for the first time in ages, is smiling as he strides across the room and sits down right next to Marie. And then as Marie began to lead the group in prayer, Michael did not feel his chronic pain. He just felt happy again. But when the meeting was over and Michael went back home again, the pain and depression came flooding back. It was like the only place he could be happy was inside of the church at this fellowship group. And so over the next couple of weeks, Michael completely prioritized this group. He went to all of their meetings, and over the course of these couple of weeks, Michael became very close with Marie, and apparently Marie became very close with Michael, to the point where two of them would stay after the meetings were over, and just those two would sequester themselves in quiet prayer. No one.
So, reason why I paused it, I was like, is it a possibility? The only reason why you're not in pain is because you're in a new environment and you feel welcome and you feel like a sense of like welcomeness. So, because sometimes a sense of welcomeness makes you feel happy, and it's a fresh area. Mm-hmm. Him being at home, it could be triggering the factor that I remember this is where I feel, this is where everything. So it can make you, because sometimes like your house might have like bad juju, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so because you're in this place, can have more positive, welcoming energy. It makes you happy. Or when I was fucking pausing too early, she can be making them feel happy, you know. You know what I'm saying? That's his happy place.
I get you.
You get what I'm saying? Like, that could be a case too. Reason why you so happy? Why you so upset? You don't know what we be doing afterwards.
Okay.
You know?
After the meetings were over, and just those two would sequester themselves in quiet prayer. No one knew what they did in there, but it just seemed like they were developing a real relationship. And in fact, many people in this group suspected they were having an affair. And before long, the rumors in the church had spread outside and were all over Ossett. And then before long, Christine, Michael's wife, was hearing from a friend or a neighbor that apparently Michael was having an affair with Marie. Now, Christine had already suspected her husband was having an affair with Marie because Marie was the only thing Michael talked about when he got home. So on October 1st of that year, only a couple of weeks after Michael had first attended this group, Christine waited until Michael had left the house to head out to one of the group meetings, and then Christine hopped in her car and she followed him to the church. And when she got there, she parked her car, she took a deep breath, and then she got out, she made her way to the front doors of the church, and she stormed inside, and she found the room where these meetings were held. She barges in, and she points at her husband, and she says, "I know you're having an affair with Marie, and you're going to admit it in front of this whole group." And Michael, who's sitting with his back to his wife in one of the chairs, he stands up, and instead of addressing his wife, who's accused him of infidelity, he turns and looks at Marie on the other side of the room. And when Marie made eye contact with Michael, she screamed. She would later say Michael did not look human. He looked like a beast, and he had wild eyes. And so as Michael is standing there staring at Marie with this very aggressive face, he began breaking out in tongues. Speaking in tongues is where the speaker will be saying or uttering words or sounds that sound like language, but the speaker doesn't know what they mean. The idea is some entity has come inside of their body, and this entity is dictating their speech. And so Michael is broken out in tongues. He's barking these words and sounds at Marie, and everyone inside of the room has no idea what to make of this. Everything has happened so suddenly, and it's so surprising. You have the wife suddenly coming in and aggressively accusing her husband of cheating, and Michael is not responding to it, and he's acting totally crazy. And then, before anyone can do anything, Michael goes from just barking in strange languages at Marie to suddenly rushing across the room as if he's going to attack her. And when he does that, the rest of the members jump on top of him and hold him down. And despite there being like 10 or 15 people holding him down, Michael is still trying to get up, and he's screaming and snarling and yelling at Marie. And then Marie suddenly breaks out into tongues too. And it's only then that Michael stops trying to force himself up out of this pig pile that's on top of him, and instead he just continues to speak in tongues to her. And so the two of them are looking at each other speaking in tongues, and the rest of the group is just totally dumbfounded, and so they just begin praying. And then after about an hour, Michael just collapses. It's like he went unconscious. And at that point, everybody in the room just goes silent, and they look at Michael, and then Michael kind of opens his eyes, and it's almost like he's waking up, and he begins looking around frantically, trying to figure out what had just happened. Michael would claim he had no memory of what had just happened to him. And so at this point, Marie would tell him and Christine that she believed Michael was possessed by a demonic force, and the only thing they could do at this point would be to perform an exorcism. An exorcism is an expulsion or attempted expulsion of a supposedly evil spirit inside of a person or a place. Michael and Christine were at a loss. They had no idea what to do in this situation. They were both kind of in shock for very different reasons, and so they just kind of deferred to Marie's judgment and said, yeah, I think an exorcism is the way to go. So Christine and
my only question is, what the hell y'all been doing in them rooms for real? It's just y'all two.
And these acts just started like with him, like acting this way or doing whatever their behavior.
And she the only one who could talk to him. What the hell really was going on in that room?
Marie was
putting some
things.
And to be real, I always say it's be weird when people be like, y'all be obsessed with these folks who be young too. Mm-hmm. Like she was 21.
Oh yeah.
What made you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like I ain't blaming it. I'm just I'm saying I really want to know what was really going on behind closed doors that didn't nobody else know about. Mm-hmm. Because even though y'all expected an affair, that doesn't necessarily mean that was going on. Yeah. It could have been mean that she was putting him in some type of trance, trying to experiment. We don't know.
Or trying to experiment with getting rid of this pain or, whatever trauma, on his body that he
by religious ways and praying on him, laying. You got to watch who speak over you. Mm-hmm. Because some people ain't just speaking.
Yeah.
deferred to Marie's judgment and said, yeah, I think an exorcism is the way to go. So Christine and Michael just leave the church and go home. And then the next morning, Marie would get in touch with the Anglican Church of England and would request an exorcism. And after hearing about what was going on with Michael, the Anglican Church would say, yeah, that does sound like he needs an exorcism. And so the following day, they would send out 2 of their best exorcists named Peter and Raymond. And so Peter and Raymond, they get to Ossett, they go to Michael's house, and they observe him, and very quickly they determine that it does seem like Michael is possessed by at least one demonic force. And so they tell Michael, the only thing we can do here is perform this exorcism, but we need you to agree to it. And so Michael says, okay, yeah, I agree to this exorcism, and so would his wife, because she at this point is just completely unsure what to do. She's just going along for the ride. So a day later, on October 4th at 10 p.m., Michael, his wife, and the rest of the members of this fellowship group, along with Peter and Raymond, they would all meet at this other church in a neighboring town. And as soon as Michael had been positioned in the middle of this group in this chair, Peter and Raymond began the ritual by praying. And as soon as they did, Michael began screaming out in tongues, and he began writhing around, and he fell to the ground, and he began contorting his body in grotesque positions, as if the words Peter and Raymond were saying were physically harming Michael. And so after 8 hours of this, during which they had to actually tie Michael down to prevent him from hurting other members or hurting himself, after 8 hours, they finally just came to a stop. Peter and Raymond were exhausted. It looked very much like Michael too was exhausted. And as soon as they stopped the ritual, Michael just kind of collapsed on the ground as if he had fallen unconscious. And then at some point he kind of wakes up and he's looking around wildly. He's still tied down to the ground and he's acting like he has no idea what's just happened. And at this point, Peter and Raymond, they tell him that, the exorcism was mostly successful. We identified 40 demons inside of you, and this exorcism was able to expel 37 of them. So that means there's still 3 demons inside of you. Now, we can't do it right now. We're too tired. You're too exhausted. So go home, get some rest, and tomorrow we will finish this exorcism. We will get rid of those 3 demons, and you will be just fine. And so Michael and Christine, they get their things, and they leave the church, and they head home. A few hours later, around noon, a woman who lived near where Michael Taylor and his family lived thought she heard something strange outside of her house. It sounded like someone yelling. And so she went to the front of the house and she pulled the curtain aside on one of her windows. And outside, walking down the street completely naked, covered in blood, was Michael Taylor. And he was saying something about Satan. And so this woman, she calls the police. The police show up and they find Michael. He had curled up on the sidewalk outside of this woman's house and he was giggling like a child in the fetal position. And so the police approach him, and at some point Michael apparently snaps out of it and he starts looking up at the police like he has no idea what's going on. And eventually they would...
For one, why would... Hold on, I know, I'm sorry. This just irritates me. If you just had an exorcism with someone, you say they were 40 demons inside.
Got 37 now. Still got 3 of them bad boys, honey.
Why would you
Ready
even if you...
Especially you done already kind of channeled, look.
Why would you and bother them?
Yeah.
If all this is real, why the hell would you just send them home?
With his family. Why?
And the demons can take over his body anytime they want to.
But this is my thing. Where do you keep him at?
At least keep him in the church. Lock him. Keep him somewhere where we
Just
know where he's at. By
himself.
I'm sure lock him up in a cell. I'm sure y'all probably got one.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, y'all probably got one. But you can keep an eye on him. Bring him food. Bring him water. And then as you need to go back in, go back in. But you don't send him home.
Yeah.
After just going through all that, y'all don't even know if y'all, to be real, y'all probably thought y'all got rid of
the 37. You probably thought you got rid of the 37.
And 37 moved in.
Or you miscounted and it was more than 40. Like,
bruh,
that is...
Bruh.
I don't know, but
giggling like a child in the fetal position. And so the police approach him, and at some point Michael apparently snaps out of it, and he starts looking up at the police like he has no idea what's going on, and eventually they would get him to tell them his name and where he lived. And so after calling in backup to deal with Michael, the responding officers made their way to Michael's residence. And so they go inside, and immediately, as soon as they see what's in there, one of the officers just turns around and runs outside and begins dry heaving. The inside of the Taylor family home would become one of the most infamous crime scenes in English history. A few hours earlier, when Michael and his wife had come home from the exorcism, they had gone inside, and then Michael had fallen into one of his trances and began beating his wife. And then at some point, she fell to the ground and either was dead or was in the process of dying, at which point Michael jumped on top of her, and using only his hands, he ripped her face off and flung it across the room. And then as she's laying there bleeding to death, he began rubbing her blood all over his body. And then after she had finally died, he tracked down the family dog and killed the dog as well. Fortunately, their 5 children were not home at the time of this attack, and so they were unharmed. During Michael's trial, the prosecution and the defense blamed the Anglican Church of England and Marie and her religious group for effectively convincing Michael he was possessed with demons, which caused him to act out violently and kill his wife. And so ultimately, Michael would be found not guilty by reason of insanity, and after only 4 years of psychiatric care, he was released. And today, he is still living free in Ossett. But despite the legal outcomes of this case, there are many people, both religious and not religious, who believe the Michael Taylor case is one of the only true demonic possession cases in modern history. Also, just to close the loop, we don't know for sure if Michael and Marie were having an affair, but it is assumed they were. And so that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret and
What was you about to say, baby?
Do I believe he was having an affair? Nah, I think she was in there doing something.
And then
I think she was in there experimenting with him, and messed up, and don't know what the. I'm just something in my mind's like she, because nobody knows. It's just y'all, and y'all supposed to be having prayer. Or are you praying over him because he let you know that he was having bad problems? You probably.
But my thing is, why do we gotta do this afterward, after hours, like
Sure.
after the group?
Sure.
Like
She probably said she wanted. So do you? Let me ask you: do you believe they had an affair?
I can't say. I really can't say.
It looked like an affair, but also it could have been some way deeper than an affair.
Yeah, like I think having it for that would have just been, just top of the surface.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I can whatever, but if y'all do, she doing all this other stuff or whatever the case is, they did, put some type of blame on that church and on her for making him believe that he was possessed or whatever the case.
Because as soon as she came in, she said, "You're having that was the first lash out that somebody head towards him, and so it woke something up in him, and so for her to say, "Hey, he looked like a," in the face, and he was speaking in tongue and doing all that,
and his only focus was to Marie,
because she,
yeah,
and then she automatically probably knew how to control it. And she started speaking in tone back. And then the only two that was communicating with each other, and they're talking to each other because this ain't the first time doing any of that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm like, you gotta watch it, bro. Like you really gotta watch who.
And it's so crazy because some people don't feel or believe that stuff is real and that stuff can happen, and.
It's a possibility. Like, I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying it can. I'm just saying whoever you are, you believe what you want to believe, but everything has a possibility.
Yeah.
And so, and then my whole thing is, y'all told this man to go home.
That's the thing that I'm just
after doing all that.
Like, why?
You don't tell somebody just go home and basically live your life and we'll come back at it tomorrow.
Especially when you kind of stop. Like kind of midway because you were tired, he was tired, and then y'all kind of was like he went and slumped over, and you felt like okay, he's come out of whatever that is, he's back to his normal self. No, I'm
You're
sorry.
supposed to keep going.
Y'all
though.
midway through, channeling these demons.
So
or
do you
whatever
partially
the case, these demonic
blame her
spirits.
death on them? Do you partially or do you at all blame her death on them? Like they're part of the reason why she died?
The wife?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because personally, none of this stuff was happening before you got in this group. Whatever was going on, either in the group or because we don't even know if everybody in the group, just as innocent, but we don't know what was going on in this group.
Passing around stuff.
Like, what were you teaching them? Like, what?
The teachings,
What? I don't know what y'all, what y'all reading out of. Like, I don't know nothing. I don't have no details.
And like
I always
then
you're staying after hours doing things, and people are speculating things. Like, what are you actually doing?
Well,
like,
what type of meetings and touching and laying hands are y'all really doing? Now, if y'all just touching each other, laying hands in that way, this one had happened.
Yeah.
Like, if y'all was just having an affair, I don't think all this would have happened. Or was Michael faking it the whole time? And he got mad because his wife found out about the affair. And he like, you got the nerve to come to me. And they could have been plotting it the whole time. I don't know. It's speculation. I'm just exaggerating on it. But
just from yeah, that's speculation. But just from what he did to his wife.
Yeah.
You gotta be for real.
Possessed.
Like, and not even possessed. You just gotta be for real. Like, let's just take the possessed. You gotta be for real sick in the mind, in the head, to even be able to do that.
I don't know how you able.
And then turn to the dog. And
that's just what I'm saying. Like, that's beyond like human strength.
That's
to be able to rip a face off
and just
And
then in your head, you want anything in sight. I'm about to get rid of.
Nah.
You know what I'm saying? So
cutting, but rip with hand.
With your bare hands?
Nah.
That's a lot. That takes a lot.
I said that's beyond human strength.
Yeah, my God.
To even know where to start.
That made me sick to my stomach. Don't pull my
I'm just like, how you even fathom to do that type of thing? I don't know.
But and again, it can sound so crazy, like, oh my gosh, people believe anything or whatever, because you do have people that don't think that stuff is real.
But it could be, like I said, it could have been the fact that she even found out about the affair.
Yeah.
And they had already plotted to do what they. Because my thing is, even though all this, how they have Michael and Marie had any communication beyond that situation?
My thing is still.
I want to know that as well. After the 4 years, after he got out after his 4 years,
I just think that's bizarre for you to. I think it's bizarre. If we have an affair, we have an affair. You find out. But
shit like
that's
this
kind of
happened,
extreme to be. Okay, I'm gonna play like I'm possessed and 40
40
demons inside of me, and then rip my wife's face off.
It happens.
Like, I know stuff happens, especially like whatever. Like stuff happens. I get that, but I'm like, after a while, plotting, I'm tired. I'm not doing this. If I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, no. But you do have people that do some crazy things and plot some crazy things. But then again, I do feel like it's a toss. It's a toss in the air. Like, I don't know. There's no telling. But from what I've gathered, he was possessed with 40 demons. Whatever the case. And either, like we said, one of the three that were left, as they say, were the ones that
actually attacked.
Yeah. So if that's what they said, that's what they speculated. But not speculated. That's what they concluded. Yeah.
Still speculating. But with that being said, man, y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions. Each three of these stories was wild.
Yeah.
I hated for the first guy. I hated for the second, and I hated for the third.
Yeah.
Like, all three individuals, like, it just bizarre situation happened to them, and I wouldn't fathom. I wouldn't want to experience nothing that each three had to deal with.
Right. And rest in peace to the third one, the wife.
All three.
And the dog.
All three victims, because we have three victims.
It is three victims. So, when you think about it.
R.I.P. to all three victims, man. Hey, man, again, let us know y'all thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. But as always, Y'all know how it goes, man. I do go by the name DJ Kid. This is.
You have a host?
We are. We are.
Go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. $1